Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Match gameplay. This time around we're on the Broken Lands playing as Brettonia against the force of the Greenskins. And this was a bit of a silly game because my opponent Slate X here straight up said when we were setting up armies, he's going to be running a bit of a meme game. So I decided, you know what, as Brettonia, instead of going for something hyper competitive, maybe with some Royal Hippogriffs and Lewin or Fae and that sort of stuff, let's try a little bit of memery ourselves. Though Brettonia, probably not the most meme-worthy faction, if I have to be honest, but I figured let's try something a little bit silly as well. So going into this with Brettonia, this is meant to be a mass stacker build, as you've probably seen earlier on the channel at some points. We have brought a Prophetess of Heavens as our lord. I think this is a good combo with these wide peasant builds because you don't need the healing from the Fae, you don't really need the stopping power from Lewin, so you do get Assault of Stone, nice little bombardment. You've got Arcane Conduit for Winds of Magic, and then because we got Lord of Heavens, we've got a nice selection of spells: Curse of the Midnight Wind, Wind Blast, Direct Gobos, and Harmonic Convergence for buffs on single targets. And Curse of the Midnight Wind especially very useful for counteracting Wa, making your troops a bit more survivable. Now for our front line, it is a mix of spearmen with shields as well as foot squires, 3 units of foot squires, 4 units of spearmen. Now funny thing was, when I started this game out, I basically went ham on my infantry line and then just bought a bunch of bows. You can see we've got 8 of them back here. We've got peasant bows, pox arrows, fire arrows, normal peasant bows, and pox arrows. And I found out I had like 3,000 gold left over and not enough slots for more units. So I kind of started upgrading and ditching infantry. So I did end up with the Companions of Canel on one end, as well as some questing knights over here, and then 2 units of Knights Errant that I figured I'd use. When my opponent said he's going to meme, I figured there was a good chance it was going to be a goblin build with some sort of goblin skirmish shenanigans and annoying goblin plays, and so I figured Knights Errant would probably not be a bad idea there. Now for my opponent though, he decided to go for a hilarious doom blob of stealthiness. You can see here he's immediately casting Night Shroud, which is going to give his troops stalk and unspottable. Unspottable basically means that a unit does not get revealed until you're literally on top of them. I don't know how this works when you're facing off against, say, I don't entirely know how it works against the primal instinct or the primal senses or whatever it is of the lizardmen, but besides that, for every other faction I basically have to be on top of my opponent to get a reveal. Now for my opponent's build, he did bring Grimgore, and initially I thought it was Scarsnake who had brought sneaky tricksy traps, but no, it was Grimgore. He's got, of course, Wa, Foe Seeker, as well as Skitsnake, and once he gets into the fight, he's going to be able to really do a lot of damage to my infantry and get that Wa off at least once, perhaps even twice. Alongside him, there is a Night Gobbo Shaman who does have quite the selection of spells. He's got Night Shroud, of course, which my opponent immediately used here. He's got Itchy Nuisance for the debuffs, Vindictive Glare to snipe my caster, and then he does have Sneaky Stabbing. And of course, on top of that, Sneaky Stealing to debuff my lore, and Wand of Jet for extra Winds of Magic. For his front line, my opponent is pretty thin. Some nasty Skulkers, the Crimson Killers, as well as Night Goblins, which honestly, and these are the 8 big loonies, of course. These guys will be able to sort of munch through my front line, especially with the backing of these 3 hilarious Squig Herd back here, as well as these Trolls. There are 2 units of Trolls in there. There's also a Giant, as well as the Arachnarok Queen, who of course has Spiraling Summons to compromise my backline. But definitely my backline should be fairly safe this game. My opponent didn't bring too many tools to just run through and compromise the Archer line. So that's definitely a bit of a benefit. And immediately off the bat, I did see my opponent had a Giant and an Arachnarok before he managed to cloak everything. But you can see over here, we're going to fly over with our Prophetess, take a few arrows there from the Spider Crew, and we're going to take a Vindictive Glare there before I can get out of dodge, which is a little bit unfortunate. But you know what? Well, that was pretty bad. But now my opponent is going to disappear once again. He's going to get hidden. So we're going to try to drop an Assault of Stone on him, hoping to get a bombardment. But I kind of mistimed it. I didn't realize the channeling time was so long. And it really doesn't do very much. You can see it only clips the back end of these 2 squigs. Sure, it did some damage, but nothing too impressive. And that's basically used up that ability already. In the meantime, our infantry is swinging over here, looking to get some spots, some vision on my opponent, and the cavalry kind of playing it safe. Unfortunately though, I'm a bit of a misplay here on my part. I forgot to select these questing knights when I was moving everything over here, so they are a bit out of position. Now in the meantime, my opponent's death blob is going to reveal itself over here and start crashing straight into this blob over here. These infantry, these foot squires and spearmen, ready to deflect them. You can see immediately there's going to be a hail of arrows, focusing on the Trolls as well as on the Squig Herd, looking to get rid of these very squishy, easy to rampage units or easy to rout units in the case of the Trolls. And the thing is, peasant bows honestly do a lot of damage, and they can definitely do a lot of hurt. And you can see these squigs here are going to rampage. They're going to run straight into the spearmen. The spearmen do have bonus against large, charge defense against large. The squigs, of course, are in fact large, so they're going to rout. These Trolls over here not going to last much longer, despite Grimgor being in there to buff them, and you can see this queen is in the fray. She's going to start dropping some summons and being an absolute pain to my backline. The summons actually they're blocking the defenders as well, which is definitely annoying. That said, my opponent has nothing against these archers because his entire army was built around this stealth blob. And so while he's munching through this front line here, we are going to get a nice meaty charge into these nasty skulkers with our companions of Canal. And in the meantime, as these troops plow through into my archery line, this giant over here can completely annihilate. Crystal Midnight Wind debuffing this front line. This pocket of archers over here on the flank just laying those troops low. Unfortunately, huge misplay on my part here, though, not getting on top of this infantry to swing them in this way. And that is what I should have done ages ago. I really should have started boxing them much sooner. And instead, I just let this front line collapse and did nothing with like 4 or 5 units that could have easily been stemming the tide. This does mean that these poor peasant bows are going to rout. You can see the defenders with fluidity there, snap and run as well. The frenzy not protecting them when they take so much damage. But, you know, the companions of Canel here run down the nasty skulkers, completely crush them. And do kind of manage to outmaneuver and stay alive against these squigs and the Crimson Killers and all those troops. Because, well, they're very good units, for sure. The companions do have their built-in physical resist. They do have very high melee defense of 48. The Black Orcs, even Crimson Killers, only have 43 melee attacks, so not the most amazing. Now, over here, my opponent is the tide is kind of being bogged down. Now, sure, he's still got Spider Hatchling. He still does have this giant, but now there's just this constant tide. Knights Errant being thrown into with the mass. We do have Itchy Nuisance going down, but it doesn't really matter because most of my damage is from my archers. The questing knights over here do get kind of bogged down by the trolls, but the giant is going to go down, felled by a hail of arrows, just collapsing over there, staggered and destroyed. And suddenly things are looking up for myself. I am keeping my caster in the back because I did know that one or two more Vindictive Ledge would be enough to finish her off. You can see the Ragnarok Speed just taking a pounding from a hail of arrows, and unfortunately she is very tanky. She does have 150 armor, but we are trying to sort of stagger her with all that withering fire. And, you know, eventually some of it, especially at this range where the peasants basically can't miss, some of it is going to start adding up. She is going to start suffering. Elsewhere in the meantime, the Knights Errant are going to get on top of this poor Night Goblin Shaman, start tying him down and beating him up, and Peasant Bows rallying here in the third quarter, coming back in and unloading on the backs of these trolls. And trolls, of course, do not have the best leadership. They don't have the best armor either, so with only 10 armor right now with Crystal Midnight Wind, the spears are going to be doing decent amounts of work. The trolls are going to be kind of trash canned. In the back over here, we did actually manage to save our peasant bows from the spider hatchlings and are now pushing back in with questing knights as well as some foot squires and bowmen. And this rallying blob of shooting is just going to become such a pain for my opponent. Now, unfortunately, over here, Squig's kind of harassing my spearmen. Grimgor, still very healthy, is able to get another wall off, and that really does show Grimgor's power. Obviously, had my opponent had Wartsag or against this sort of build, he'd probably be able to stay in there as well and at least do some damage, but it's much safer and much more consistent for Grimgor to be in a fight and just get that second wall off, and he definitely does that over there. Unfortunately, though, my opponent no longer really has the tools. Slade's kind of run out of troops to take advantage of Wa. His Squig herd here is routing. His trolls are way out of position. Ragnarok Queen way out of position. Wa is almost expired, and he's basically got no value out of it. The Crimson Killers are getting picked apart by Peasant Fire. You can see we're going to throw some Knights Errant in there, and their sole purpose here is to just muck them up, tie these Crimson Killers down for a little bit, and then shimmy on over to this flank to try to save the archers. And the Ragnarok Queen just having a field day. 150 armor makes her basically borderline immune to those peasants. Now, sure, she's getting exhausted, she's getting tired, but still, just so brutal that Terror's going to kick in. Peasants have no leadership to speak of, and they're just mass routing constantly. So it's definitely some brutal stuff here. You can see the Queen getting overwhelmed slowly but surely. These Spider Hatchlings here running down the Peasant Bows. Spider Hatchlings is definitely a nuisance. They don't do a lot of damage. If we look at their stats, they're not amazing. 23, of which only 5 is AP. But they do have 76 speed, which is probably their big, and poison, which are probably their two biggest saving graces. Over here, we're going to drop a Crystal Midnight Wind, trying to protect our troops a little bit from these Spider Hatchlings and the Spider, though perhaps not doing enough. The Questing Knights in the meantime do commit. I had a lot of Winds of Magic left over because my poor Enchantress has kind of been forced to stay away from the fight. But with the Questing Knights in here now, they're going to have the mass to stop the Ragnarok Queen. And of course, they also do have the AP to cut through her armor. And especially now that they're getting Harmonic Convergence, they can be doing so much more consistently. She doesn't really have the best melee defense. Only 41 against these guys, up to 66 with Harmonic Convergence, but they have 40 normally. So they're going to cut her down. The archers are in there as well. And we're going to try to stop these Spiderlings, but not quite able to cut the mustard with the Prophetess. Elsewhere in the meantime, the hail of arrows continues to pound away at these trolls, who do manage to get rid of some foot squires, but honestly, the leadership is just so bad. They're too far from Grimgor to get his leadership up, and they're going to start getting picked apart. You can see wavering, broken by the peasant arrows. Over here, the companions of Canals with some spears run over these trolls, and the peasant boat, or this is men at arms here, just bog down the Crimson Killers until my opponent's army simply shatters. And Grimgor there, you can actually see this was one of the problems Grimgor has. With a fairly bad melee defense of 45, even the foot squires were actually able to take him to task once they surrounded him and started beating him down. So definitely one of his big problems is against great weapons. That is going to be game for the Brettonians. Definitely a bit of a meme game, and I kind of also Slade X, very good player by the way, and he actually did a lot of damage despite this build being obviously very memey. This is not necessarily competitive, no, not necessarily. It literally is not a competitive build. It's just a silly, fun build. Very cool, actually, idea with the stealth. I initially thought my opponent had brought Skarsnik, because I didn't check what lord he had, and when I saw the stealth go off immediately, I assumed it was Skarsnik. So I was a bit surprised when I saw it was Grimgor. I'm like, crap, I can't kill him that easily. But definitely a cool comp here, taking advantage of the just the death ball with the stealth to protect himself. Now, one of the downfalls, I guess, is the low armor of this build. The armor is very low, the leadership is very low for most of these units. So against the peasant bowfire that I brought, because I figured, you know, this is just a silly build as well, going super wide with Brettonians, it can work. Excuse me, it can work, just like this build can potentially work. I think this might be a bit more competitive, to be honest, but I figured, you know, peasant bows, it's going to be some fun, and ironically, it ends up countering these sorts of squish units pretty well. The giant went down like a 9-pin. Only the Ragnarok Queen was very tanky, but there's only one of her, and so obviously, even with the Spiderlings helping, she's just not able to compromise an entire backline of 8 peasant bows. That said, honestly, if you're just looking for a bit of a memey but still decent build, this is not too bad. You've got a lot of infantry to sort of cover your front line, to stall your opponent through the wall. You've got the Prophetess of Heavens providing that debuff to deny your opponent too much value out of wall. And you've got 4 units of cav that can protect your flanks against skirmishers and harass that Greenskins are really fond of. And unlike factions like Wood Elves, where they've got really, or if you're trying to use light cav, where the wall can really bust you and mess you up, the decent armor on Brettonian cav means that they can tank through, say, Spider Riders or Wolf Riders, wad up. They'll survive it and trash them, and that's really pretty important. And of course, Campaigns of Canal and Questing Knights do give you a little bit of extra oomph. I actually kind of misused them this game. I really should have used the Questing Knights and the Campaigns of Canal to more shut down the Ragnarok Queen, and instead I ended up using these guys on the periphery, where the Knights Errant would have been much better. But what can you do? Regardless, it's not a terrible build. It's just a bit silly and definitely very peasant heavy and fun. So regardless, well played to Slade here. Definitely a fun little build. I figured it was a silly match to put up. I do apologize, guys, for not having posted these past 2 days. I was simply busy with work and just was not even at home for 3 days straight. So I just didn't have really the opportunity to play or much less make any videos. Hopefully, my schedule will be a bit more consistent in the coming weeks. Though there still might be 1 or 2 things left in the next month that might mess with it. We'll see. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you found it entertaining. If you did, as usual, hit that like button and that subscribe button. If you have any comments, any criticism, any requests, do not hesitate to post them, and I will do my very best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.